Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Food Origins Podcast. Today, my guest is Mark Melnick, founder of Trex Corp. Mark and I sat down on location at Trex Corp in San Francisco Bay Area in Burlingame, and we talked about the beef industry, growing up in Japan, Japanese American, being half Japanese, growing up born and raised in Tokyo, and growing up there, and then coming over to San Francisco, and ended up becoming one of the largest Japanese Wagyu importers in America. It was an awesome conversation. Really enjoyed talking to Mark. Really extensive detail into how the industry goes through all the different struggles back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, dealing with some disease, dealing with import, export, taxes, and struggles there. We go into a lot of detail on that and get into all the different Wagyu and beef that's coming in and out of the country. So appreciate Mark for being on and enjoy this one, you guys. The first sponsor of the Food Origins podcast is Firecracker Farm. Thanks to Alex and his family, small business out of Florida. They're creating infused salt with hot peppers. Here it is right here, an awesome push grinder. 10% of their proceeds go to Op 300 and Pipe Hitter Foundation. And all you got to do with it, get a little spice, doing some smash burgers out here, just hit the push grinder real quick. Boom, boom, boom. That's all you need. Food Origins Pod C for the code. Appreciate the support. Thank you, Alex. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Bring it up a little bit more, almost like newscasters. But I think it's just fun because you can relax your hands and stuff. So, yeah, we'll get things going. We'll get things rocking and rolling. First off, thanks for being here. I got another episode of the Food Origins podcast. We are here on location in Burlingame at Trex Corp, and I am with Mark Melnick, who is the former president of Trex Corp, and he's still an advisor to the company. Thanks for being here, Mark.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Of course, of course. I was introduced to you through the biggest product that you are responsible for bringing in, which is Japanese Wagyu. But, why don't you go ahead and get into about yourself? Just tell us where you're from, where you grew up. I mean, I know a little bit about it, but I want to let you tell your story. Go from there.
I was born in Tokyo in 1956. I have a sort of a similar background. My father was Caucasian, Ukrainian, Polish descent, and my mother's Japanese. And they met after the war, and my father was in Japan during the Reconstruction period. And I went to an international school and graduated high school in 73 and came to San Francisco and lived in the Bay Area ever since. So I've been here almost 55 years.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you were born in Tokyo, right?
I'm born in Tokyo, and yeah.
Yeah. What was it like growing up there?
Actually, I was in a unique position. There weren't that many foreigners in Japan when I was growing up, and we played really hard with the neighborhood kids, and we played war, and we were taking hostages and tying kids up in a tree and throwing these firecrackers at each other, thinking it's a grenade, and we really played hard with the Japanese kids. And but I was born and raised in Japan, and even though I had American citizenship, I never really experienced life in America. Apparently, my mother and father took me to the States to show me to my father's side of parents when I was less than a year old. But I've never been to States, and I'm getting off sidetrack. But
No, you could.
one time I was hostage by this Japanese American family, and taken into a room and shown a map of United States, and was asked, "Do you know where California is in the map?"
Wait, no, is this real or is this fake?
No, it's really.
Okay, so like we're gonna get into that.
So,
We're gonna get into that. Yeah. So tell us that story,
uh,
because you were, you gave me some background,
uh,
and you're telling me that, unfortunately your parents divorced while you were growing up,
yeah,
right, early on,
yes,
and then your mother managed the export company,
yes,
right?
yes, I did. She had, it was actually my father's company.
It was, yeah, right. It was
And
your
then my
father's
father
company.
had a stroke and basically became disabled, and my
Mm.
mother took over. And one of the first product that they were exporting was water filter and furnitures and to the United States. And um, yeah, and then they evolved into exporting
Yeah,
shoes.
and you were telling me, I
Uh,
think, you mentioned is the struggles of business, right?
mm,
And that's what you were telling me that, like, with dollar
uh,
devaluation,
yes,
orders getting canceled,
yes,
and then
yes.
that statement of kidnapping.
Yeah, yeah.
So now I want to
So
hear this story.
you want to hear that story?
Of course, everybody wants to hear that story.
Well,
Tell us about it.
early on, the exchange rate was fixed at 360 yen per dollar. That
Okay.
means a dollar could buy 360 yen.
Right.
That means there were, a lot of demand for Japanese product because they could buy a lot more yen, right?
Hmm.
And I think 1972, the dollar was pegged to the gold standard, and the dollar devaluated from 360 yen to like a 280 on an overnight basis.
Mm.
And I remember at that time my mother was involved with like a shoe export to the States. And I remember later on that she got the orders canceled, from the customers in the States.
Right.
And the manufacturing plant kidnapped her, and she was missing like 10 days, um, by these captors, trying to demand her to honor the contract. And
Wow.
yeah, that was, and I was only 16 at that time, and I was living, in a household with my mother's grandparents and aunts, and uh, we were. I don't know if the police were involved or not, but we were trying to locate and make sure she's safe, and
Hmm.
yeah. But I could see, from that experience, I knew the people she ordered the shoes from. They were like a Korean Japanese family, and I spent summers together. But after that incident, I it was a time where a friend that I played together were no longer friends because of
Yeah.
that incident.
Became enemies, right?
Yeah, but
I mean, that's
yeah,
tough,
uh,
like business, like.
so I saw that kind of experience firsthand, and
Mhm.
um, I I sort of got into the business, um, not directly. Like
Indirectly,
I
yeah.
went to San Francisco State University, and I started out as a business major, and I was only 17, and my first class was a 8 o'clock accounting class, and I hated it. And it didn't make any sense. And but I stuck around for about a year and a half, and I took the economics and statistic and other business class. But I said it's really boring, so I switched my major to humanities, and my career path was going to take me into teaching. And I got my master's at the University of San Francisco for bilingual education, and again, politics came into play, and at that 1979, Proposition 13 passed, and I had my first assignment in Chinatown to teach in a bilingual school, but the assignment was soon canceled because the city did not allocate money for non-tenured teachers.
Right.
And I think that policemen and other public workers were also laid off because of the budget constraints. So,
Yeah, and the budget constraints still to this day trouble the city.
yes.
Where'd you go from there?
Where'd I go from there? Okay, so I was going to.
Well, wait, finish
so-
the kidnapping story because you got questioned,
Well,
right?
Question? No.
They were just kind of asking you about the U.S., expecting you to know.
No. That story goes back to that the kid that child, that could play and.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's,
Got it.
That's
Got it.
two kidnappings.
Two stories. Okay.
two
Got it.
kidnappings.
Sorry, I was
Yeah.
confused. So
But that childhood kidnapping story was that I could not tell to the Japanese American family who kidnapped me where California was. And,
Okay.
I was being ridiculed for that.
that's funny.
So that's how probably engrossed I was with that Japanese
Culture.
life and
life,
culture.
yeah. I mean, and people, like Mark is fluent in Japanese,
And there were that many foreigners. So even through like in 1970s,
especially back then,
when
right?
I was going to high school, some of my complete white Caucasian friends who were also raised in Japan, will be speaking Japanese to each other in a train, and the Japanese people will look at us and says, come up to us and says, how, what's wrong with you guys? It says, well, and then say, what are you? Nanijin desu ka? What person are you?
Right.
The usual response is gaijin, or foreigners.
Sure.
But we used to kid by saying ninjin or cabbaging, or which is Japanese word for carrot and or a medicine, stomach medicine. So,
Yeah.
But but it was I was in a very comfortable environment, and
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
you were growing up in it. It's not like you just showed up. You were born and raised there.
and Japan is a very homogeneous country, and they could be very prejudicial, to non-Japanese, and just like the word gaijin means, everybody that's not Japanese is foreigner.
Right.
And being born 10 years after the war, I really did not experience not prejudice or
Racism or anything.
And but only once in a train, a kid came up and says, "Your country killed my father," or something like that. But that was only one incident in 17 years ago.
Yeah.
But
I think we have the same thing in common. My parents, my dad's American, my mom's from Kyoto, and I grew up mixed. So a lot of times I got looked at like, what are you? Like, why are you eating onigiri for, like my brother was talking about, we bring onigiri to school when we were young, and they're looking at our food like, what is that? Like, and get made fun of for weird food, which is not weird. Like that's a very traditional like meal.
Yeah.
Some meat and rice or whatever, and like, but that mixed thing, like I still get it today. They're like, well, are you Latin, Portuguese? The Japanese sometimes is difficult, and some people recognize it, but it's different, right? Like it's a different feeling. But I grew up. I mean, like I think it opened me to not care so much about what someone else is, because I'm so mixed. So it kind of just like, we're just people, and you're from where you are, and then whatever we're doing together, we're doing it, so like it just kind of blends everything together, and we just support each other for who they are, not because of what they look like or where, what race they are. It's like we've all kind of blended that through and crossed all those paths, like
Like I hate to, like, sometimes you go to a doctor's office or donating blood, they ask you what your race is. I always answer, none.
none.
Or don't want to answer.
Other?
Other, yeah.
Yeah, other. I've seen the other. I've had to check other a lot because they're like, well, are you, any of these? I'm like, well, I'm some of those, and then it's other.
You were, but raised in the States.
But I was raised here. I was actually born and raised in San Francisco.
Yeah. So
just
being
down the way
raised
here.
in Japan, like,
A little different.
I never fit in, I was never considered Japanese by Japanese, and I was never American by American. I went to American school in Japan for the 3 years in high school, and I
Check on
tend to hang around with a Japanese kid in American school, and even to this date, in the business, my Japanese customer thinks I'm not Japanese, and my American supplier from the Midwest thinks I'm Japanese. So one time,
I mean, I thought you were Japanese when I first met you. Like, I mean, I didn't think anything else.
I had a longer hair, and I used to live in the Mission District.
Okay.
And people thought I was a Latin there.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that.
But I was in Korea one time, and one of my supplier from Omaha, and I was with a customer from Japan. We were together, and they had we had a laugh because Jerry from Omaha said, "Well, Mark is Japanese," and my Japanese customer said, "No, he's not Japanese. He's American."
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're both.
So I've had one of my teacher asked me at San Francisco State. I was in one of the humanities class, and he said, he tried to ask me, what do I think in Japanese or English, and he said, how do you associate? He said, maybe you're a chameleon, so I can change, like from Japanese color to,
Yeah, I mean, you've been to Hawaii.
Yes.
Like, I don't think anyone cares, right?
No.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
And
then if you
I like San Francisco. Yeah, and I like San Francisco, or when I lived there, because it was such a diverse community, and and I lived in a Mission, and I lived in the Noe Valley, and I lived in the dorms in the Richmond area. And there's the communities are really blended together. There's Chinatown, but right next to Chinatown there's a North Beach Italian, and then I thought it was
Japantown
really
too.
Cool. Yeah, Japantown.
Very cool. And then you got to see, like, that's what's interesting, because you did get to see, like, your mother and your father, like, go through the import-export business, but you ended up being in the business. How did that happen? So you were at USF finishing up, right?
So I got my master's in education, but the teaching job never materialized. And I was in, like a student teacher,
assistant, yeah.
And I knew that I was not fit to teach in elementary school because I cannot sing and I cannot play music, and I had an incident where it was in a Japanese bilingual program where there were Chinese American, Japanese American kids from Japan, and there were some African American, Caucasian students, all mixed in, but they were in Japanese bilingual program.
Yeah.
And there was this one kid that I remember. He was a Japanese American kid, but he was very disruptive, and I grabbed his arm, and he said, "Ouch!" So I said, "Oh, I don't think I belong in this profession,"
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, my wife to be was in a career path to be a teacher in a college. So, I thought I'll be outshined by my wife as a college teacher.
Yeah. Okay.
But I was waitering in a Japanese restaurant, a high-end Japanese yakitori restaurant on Webster Street. It was called Yoshidaya, and the bartender and one of the customer, we made a ski club together, and um, he introduced me to his friend who had an export company, and which was 5 years old, and it was growing. And he said, "Mark, why don't you, you know, look that?" And and I went through like an interview, like process of maybe 3 or 4 times
For the export company.
and I told finally, I said, and I was on my way to the waitering job. I said, just hire me and see if it works out. And then he said, okay, I'll hire you. And that's where I learned the trade. And I was originally in charge of selling gift box steaks to Japanese tourists who were coming in that 747, jet.
American American beef, right?
And then we sold American beef in a 5-pound box, and that was my intro to the beef business. And
Is that Oritz?
yes, and or it's
Trex Corp.
yeah, and I worked there for 17 years, and I was a dedicated, worker and loyal worker. But I don't want to go too much into it. But the boss, Mr. Gravy, was basically taught me the ropes, and it was a time where Japanese beef import was getting a lot of attention. The Japanese economy was growing. People were interested in spending money, and beef was an item that people were interested
In demand. Started to grow, right?
So
What about time is this now?
I started the kind of beef business like in 1981. There's another interesting story where the big company really had 3 business: the gift business, and a chicken export, and a beef export. And the company was stronger in the chicken export. And at that time, I liked to eat chicken more than the beef.
Yeah.
And me and another colleague sat in front of the boss, and the boss asked me first, Mark, which do you want to handle, chicken or beef? So I said chicken, and because of the way he is, he said, Mark, okay, then you're going to handle beef.
Yeah.
He didn't give my first choice,
Right.
which was a blessing of the choice, because that led me to the career path that led to Trex. So, but Japan was really growing, and the company, I think at that when I joined, was like a 10 million sales, and it was doubling in sales: 10 million, 20 million, 40 million.
Wow.
And I think by the time I left, I think the company was selling about 200 million, and I felt I was a big part of that, and I enjoyed it because I got to visit many plants in the States.
That's beef
like
production.
and the beef business really changed, and I saw that change happen, in my career. I think
It's a huge
I
business.
don't know where you want to go, but I saw the change.
Yeah. And so when did you shift? Like, I mean, you did talk about, like, can you talk about, when the Japanese economy started growing a lot more, the demand is going up. You said, like, there's quota restrictions.
That's right.
What was going on there?
So Japan, had their own domestic, producer, and
Okay.
and only 36 companies were quota holders, and only these quota holders had the right to import using the quota.
Okay.
And at that time, the duty was 50%. And
Explain the duty for everybody.
so basically, it's a
It's like a tax, right?
protective measure. So if you send something for $10 a pound, CNF Japan, then the duty will be $5 per pound. So
Yeah,
it's pretty
that's a lot.
costly.
Yeah.
And but Japan was exporting more cars, and there was a Japan bashing in the in the early 80s, and Japan was always under pressure to relax their trade policy, and they finally agreed to liberalize the trade in 1991. So liberalization really meant that they're going to relax their policy, slowly. So they incorporated this really convoluted system called SPS, simultaneous buy and sell system, where they allowed the importers, not the traditional 36, but the supermarkets and the restaurant chain could start importing their own using this SPS, again, a quota. So, and then the government was involved with a purchasing too, called LIPC tender, Livestock Industry Promotion Corporation. The government was holding a quota a tender, and it was a sort of a joke or party because people in Japan were colluding, because at that time, they would give company A, maybe they'll buy them 300 metric ton, and we'll buy from Oritz, where I worked, 500 ton, and
Preference.
and then the price was you had like a 1 hour window to bid on the product, and the price came down at the last moment, and then after the tender, we sort of didn't know what was going to happen the next day, but we'll go out to the Chinese restaurant nearby and party, and then find out the next morning how much we got. So
Okay. Super. They made it like the demand
they made it like
competitive, but it wasn't.
it wasn't.
Didn't have
It
to
was
be
like a made up story.
forced
Japan side.
competition.
Yeah.
Interesting. Kind of like FOMO, like what we hear now is fear of missing out. Like they're giving you that, like, oh, you're not gonna get anything. Yeah.
It was weird.
Yeah.
But
Very.
1991 is when beef trade liberalized, and then they got rid of the quota, but they hiked up the import duty to 70%,
Okay.
and then to 60% that following year, 1993, and so forth. And I think it ended up leveling off at 50, which is still very, very high.
Yeah.
And
What is it currently?
currently, I think it's like a 23%. I checked with here
Okay.
this morning, but this was also a result of a trade negotiation. Originally, Japan was on track to join the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, but during the Trump era, Trump vetoed to participate, and later on agreed to a bilateral trade agreement, and the duty was reduced from I think 38.5, incrementally 2 points down every year. So
Okay.
but it's never going down to zero.
Right.
I think it's going to stop like at 13%.
Okay.
Whereas Korea, a large trading partner of U.S. beef, they are incrementally reducing to 0%, and we're close to 0%.
Okay.
So,
Do they just want it to just be faster, I guess, or
Korea?
yeah.
I think the U.S. Trade negotiator did a better job, with the negotiating.
Yeah.
with
Less
Korea.
competition, maybe.
But Korea has their own, beef production,
Right.
so they are under threat to buy these, cheaper import product. So
That's true.
So I think eventually Japanese import duty is going to go down to like 12 or 13%.
Okay. That would be huge
Yeah.
for the last,
Yes.
God, 20, 30 years already.
So
Yeah, that's big. So before you shift to Trex Corp, like you were saying that's a lot of the obstacles you were saying is the duty and the certain competition. Was it the BSE and 057 157? What are those?
So I started Trex in 1996.
Okay.
So 5 years after liberalization.
Okay.
And the big export item were, let me backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
So the quota only applied to the muscle cuts. So non-skeletal muscle, such as hanging tender, outside skirt, tongue, and all the white, intestine item, like a favorite of the yakiniku item, like a large intestine, ome, some tendon, for the oden, they were white offal was considered 0% duty, and the non-skeletal muscle was always AA or like a free trade item. So there were companies who were not quota holder who were really anxious to participate in the beef import, and they were big export item because at that time hanging tender was considered a butcher's steak, and the butcher could take home as their own freebie byproduct item.
Yeah.
But now it's like a $10 item, but that used to be like a $2 or $3 item, and tongue wasn't that popular, but only in Japan, and these were such a hot item in expanding the yakiniku market in the business in Japan, and
all the items that were considered kind of
there's some non-quote item
less popular. We're
and
getting more popular.
that was a big commodity item, and I remember at the previous company, we used to have like a package sales of just a liver, like 20 containers of liver from Pepper Tree and packing in Colorado, and the Japanese considered that chocolate colored liver as the best liver, and and even when Trex started, liver was a big part of the business, and we were exporting as a chilled liver.
Yeah.
And we were shipping like 3,000 boxes or 3,000 head worth of chilled liver from Omaha area every week.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, you know how they were eating that liver? As a namareba or raw liver.
Wow.
And Japanese like, everything raw, like a sashimi. Even they eat horse meat, raw, and
chicken.
And so, but namareba business stopped all of a sudden because of 0157 in Japan, and so prior to the liver 0157 in Japan, there was a 0157 incident in like a hamburgers joint in I think it was in Seattle area. And
that's like the mad cow, or is it E. coli?
E. coli.
E. coli. Yeah.
And then this HACCP and program and like SOPs.
HACCP is the kind of
hazard
food
analysis,
handling
control, critical control point. So prior to these, like fatal accident, USDA was under. USDA was the sole controller of the plant operation and sanitation standard, but the USDA sort of transferred that responsibility to the plant by incorporating that every plant has to have the standard operating procedure in a written form and submitted and approved, and in that it has to have point out where is the hazard critical control point.
Yeah.
So if you go to the plant, you see a like a poster or marker saying
kind of
the temperature has to be under 50 degrees here, or
right.
And then,
Yeah, I was HACCP certified.
Oh yeah.
When I was cooking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just gives, just so everyone knows, HACCP is the organization that teaches you food handling, basically, so that you can keep bacteria out of the food, knowing what cooking temperatures should be and what storage temperatures should be.
So that was like in the 1999 and 2000, So that was our first really bump in the business. And I remember Trex started in 1996, and it was like...
who started Trex? You?
I started Trex, and I had a sponsor, Henry Davis. He's owns Great Omaha Packing in Omaha, and we were originally a division of Great Omaha, but the company set up where we are separate independent corporation, separate from Great Omaha. We're just so. I asked actually Henry if if I can buy Trex, but he said no.
Oh, outright?
Yeah. There was rumor that Great Omaha was for sale, and people in my office was worried what's going to happen if Great Omaha sells. So
Okay. But you are independent.
we are independent profit center. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was our first bump, in the business, and 2001 was another crossroads. Actually, I was in Hawaii entertaining, having a business golf outing I was in Lanai, population 3,000, and there was 2 golf courses. I arrived on Friday, and Tuesday was our return date, and I got a call from my staff at that time. Mark, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. He says, Mark, something terrible is going on. He says, what? He says, turn on the TV, and that was a 9/11 date. And I called the guest from Japan who was sleeping next door. He says, Mr. Kakamoto, you know what happened? There's something terrible that happened. And he said, what? He said, BSE in Japan was his answer. I said, no, something more terrible, because I didn't know about the BSE in Japan. And so BSE in Japan was happening at the same time that the 9/11 was happening.
Okay. What is
at
BSE?
BSE, it's like a mad cow disease.
Okay.
It's a encephalopathy. It's like an Alzheimer of a cattle.
Okay.
So, it's to explain in the late term. But, but at that time, when I called next door and asked Mr. Kagamoto, his response was BSE in Japan. I said, so that's my first time to know that something in the Japanese beef industry was happening. But at that time, it was not confirmed, and there was like a 2 or 3 weeks lag time
delay
before, and I could not come home till it happened on Tuesday, 9/11, and I couldn't come home till Friday because of all the airline, the traffic stopped.
Yeah.
And I was calling the office, and we were in a different building, but actually we were in this building, and we could see the airport, and Matt says, there's absolutely
nothing,
airplane,
no flights.
But Matt was telling me, he says, people are buying, I said, tongues and shortbread, and I was surprised that, this global tragedy is not affecting the business, and we kept on. I said, Matt, just keep on selling, keep the business keeps on. So, and then, but the day it confirmed, maybe 3 weeks later, business stopped. Business stopped, and it was a horrible thing. It was the business stopped in 2003. The 2001 was it was just in Japan.
Okay.
And but the business did slow down, after that. And second BSE was the knockout punch that we received. That was December 24th, 2003. I remember that day very well too, because Matt, who was working with me, we were making rounds to the steamship line and CFS station with a box of chocolate. And this guy, Angelo from Omaha, called Mark, watched Fox News at 5 o'clock today. I said, what? He says, just watch it. It's going to affect your business. And then before the 5 o'clock news, we start receiving call from Japan around 4:15, because it was already in the news in Japan.
Right.
And they were the one that says, what's going on? What's going on? In the States, there's mad cow disease in the States. And that's our business stopped for 6 months. Like, there was no phone call ringing anymore.
Wow.
And at that time, we didn't use cell phone.
Right. No text, easy internet. Yeah.
So everything was phone call, and maybe there was internet. Yeah. But the business really stopped, and we had to deal with ship back product. And each country treated us differently. Like Japan banned everything that did not clear customs. So even if the ship was already in Japan and container was unloaded, if it didn't receive um, the quarantine,
Clearance. Yeah.
they
didn't want it.
didn't allow. But whereas other country like Taiwan was reasonable. If it was on the boat and if we had a ocean bill of lading, they allowed entry.
Yeah.
So each country, and Korea was very strict too. So
Okay.
so that was another obstacle.
How'd you guys get through that?
So our
That's a really tough thing for
so
a business to
business
be.
We really had the only business that we had was to take a loss on the product that we were responsible.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this in business the terms are very important. FOB plant or free alongside the ship. Their terms as FAS or FOB. So we went by that term. If we bought FOB and if it was on the truck, we took the responsibility. But if we didn't unload at the port, it was not our product. So we tell supplier, it's tough luck, but we don't want to take this. You have to eat it too, kind of.
Right.
But the most loss came from the product that we were responsible with. But we lost big money, like a mountain ginger tripe. I think at that time was like a $3.50, and it was like a 10 cents on a dollar when including the ship back cost, right? So we thought that if it was in Japan and couldn't clear custom, the customer also didn't want to pay the disposal charge. So we'll give it back to you for free, and so some of the big companies. So we deal with the mid-sized plants in the States, and
Right.
and some of the big four, didn't want to take responsibility. They were really more ornery, and that we bought like IBP and Excel product that the importers. It wasn't product that we exported, but the customer, couldn't negotiate with the supplier, so they asked us to buy back boneless chuck shrimp and boneless rib shrimp, like 35 cents per pound. And those are like 15 to
Yeah.
$10 to $15 item.
Right.
It was crazy time.
That is crazy. And then
we sold it for like 50 cents and barely make margin, right?
So you're just doing it to get by.
Yeah. And then
when did it pick up again?
So I thought I was like a short rib king prior to the mad cow disease in the States, and Japan was, and then we had access to all the prime and CAB outside skirts, hanging tender, boneless shrimp, and our U.S. beef export stopped completely for 3 or 4 years, while the supplier in the States found new outlet domestically, and so by the time we were able to resume the American beef export to Japan, we didn't have the same access to the high quality beef that was in demand in Japan. And but how did we survive those lean years? We were introduced to beef and pork supplier in Sonora, Mexico, and it's an interesting story because up until BSE, we never our business model was strictly U.S. beef export to mostly Japan. Japan was like 85 or 90% of our business. Korea was second largest, maybe some to Taiwan, and Mexican beef was something that we never
wasn't thought of. Yeah.
And one of our freight forwarder had a Mexican pork export business with this supplier, and he had a trucker that took me around. His name was Diego, and when I was landing to the Hermosillo Airport, the capital of Sonora, it was all desert. And I said, where could be any livestock in this dry, arid area?
Mm-hmm.
And I went to a couple plants, and they were looking at me as a cautious, person, interested to doing business.
Sure.
And we just had talk. I maybe got to look at one plant briefly, but I remember going to a Holiday Inn for lunch, and I ate a ribeye, and that ribeye had a really good taste, and I said, "Oh, I think there's a chance."
Yeah.
And the Sonoran beef is really unique because all the female cattle are treated and exported to the states in Arizona and California market for grain feeding, whereas a steer can be castrated and kept for feeding.
Mm-hmm.
And Sonora being a very dry, arid geographic area, do not background their cattle. Background meaning that usually when the calves are born and after 3 months of staying with the mother and being, having mother's milk and being weaned, goes to a pasture to get, back size by eating, grass, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they would spend 6 to maybe sometime of 1 year, and then the typical American commodity beef would be grain fed for 120 to 150 days, whereas in Sonora there's very few opportunity to grass feed, so they'll go straight into grain feeding. They go to the from weaned cattle go to the straight to the feedlot, and they go for like a grain feeding program, and the cattle are much lighter and marketed at perhaps 300 kilogram or 660 pounds or under, whereas the American cattle carcass weight would be anywhere from 800 to 1,100 pounds.
Yeah. It's a little bit.
So Mexican beef, and we were fortunate to meet Rancho 17, Dr. Zambrano, who unfortunately passed away 3 years ago. But they were really good to me, and we are, how many years? 18 years since BSC.
Yeah.
Yeah, long time.
Mm-hmm.
We're still, continuing business.
Yeah,
with them.
and you got into Canada too, right?
Yeah, we were introduced to a packer in Brooks, Canada, called Lakeside. It was the largest Canadian-owned beef plant. Unfortunately, again, due to politics, the company went bankrupt because of an incident of E. coli, and the Canadian, they should have just recalled for the day's production, but the Canadian government punished their sole own country-owned plant by recalling everything that they produced.
That's rough.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's just they just get scared of people getting sick, right?
So now it's a JBS plant.
Yeah. Okay. And then in 2008 is probably the pivot to Japanese beef.
Yes.
Starting importing. Now we're not talking about exporting anymore. Now
So-
we're importing, right?
Our business was still slow. We were exporting Mexican beef and pork, and even with even with American beef, there was a lot of restriction placed on American beef, and the Australians did a good job on U.S. beef by differentiating by saying that Australian beef is safe and secure. Anshin anzen is like a term that Japanese love, and as if to mean that the U.S. beef is dangerous, and one of the large Japanese beef bowl chain said we're not going to handle American beef and we only serve Australian beef, and was another way to sort of
Market.
paint that discredit American beef, but so the business, even though it resumed, it was under a lot of scrutiny, and Japan imposed 20-month and younger cattle. And most of the cattle are marketed in the States anywhere from 17 months to 24 months. But there's only a certain time of the year where the young cattle comes to the market, which is in the springtime, and availability was limited.
Low,
limited. And but Japan relaxed that to 30 months, maybe 5 years later, and and even to this date, Korea still imposes 30-month and younger cattle from states, whereas all the other countries allow all age cattle 30-month. But there's even still restriction called the EV program, Export Verification Program, where Japan, I think Taiwan, and maybe have imposes this restriction, the plant procedure where they have to verify within the plant 30-month and younger, 30-month and over.
Okay.
Whereas Hong Kong, maybe I'm going to too much detail, but Hong Kong and Philippines and Thailand, they don't care about the EB program, and all ages.
Okay. Yeah. And then you started importing
Japanese
Wagyu.
Yes, Japanese Wagyu.
Tell us how that got going and the process of that.
So prior to BSE in States, our largest customer in Japan was Starzin. And I asked that director, we want to, and we knew that they were one of the largest Wagyu wholesaler, and they had their own plant.
What are they called?
The plant, Starzin?
Starzin. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and
there's a Starzin box in here.
Yes. and I think at that time only Zenno was the exporter of Japanese Wagyu, and the director was he liked me. He was a fan of me. He was one of the person that encouraged me to go independent, and he said, okay, come to Japan, we'll look at the Wagyu together, and he explained about the grading and the cuts available, and 2008 we started import, and I remember we imported like a strip loin, and in Japan the strip loin and ribeye is called rosu, or the whole thing is called loin. And we asked them at least to cut into the strip loin area and the ribeye area, and I remember selling to a company called IMP, a fish company, and I asked them, partner me with me in the Wagyu business, and he said he agreed to buy, but he said, there was no real market established, except some Japanese restaurant that knew.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the first account that they sold to was a Sakai restaurant in Burlingame, and I went to go eat, and they were, and I was with a customer, a Korean customer, and we ordered A5 strip loin sushi, and we also ordered a bluefin, otoro, and they were both priced like a $25 for 2 piece or something.
Yeah.
And I couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was, and that's how we started. And the Japanese government was not that keen about exporting, and Japanese Wagyu beef, there was a quota from the U.S. side, and the quota was very minimal. But the 200 metric ton quota was never filled for the longest time, meaning that the import level was very slow.
Yeah.
And
So that's a max, right?
yeah,
200
but
metric
you
ton
can exceed
max.
the quota, but the duty kicks into like 26%.
Got it.
And I think Justin joined about 6 years ago, so maybe 10, 12 years ago, the Japanese government started, I think the U.S. was, pressuring Japan to open up the beef trade, lowering the quota, and foreseeing the influx of U.S. beef, which would threaten the Japanese producer, the Japanese government starting promoting the Japanese beef for export countries.
Yeah.
And we did many food shows. We did food shows in Miami, Las Vegas. I was part of the, invited translator.
Yeah, my first inkling or first hearing about Wagyu beef, because you hear like, I grew up with just teriyaki, right? There was no different. I didn't know what grass fed, grain fed, all the different variations was Kobe beef. Was that like the first kind of farm prefecture area to market to
In
the
Japan?
U.S., you think?
I think
Because that's all I heard was, if it's from Kobe, it's Wagyu,
yeah. Actually, there are about 500 different brands of Wagyu.
Now, yeah,
Japan.
right.
And
yeah.
I would say that Wagyu became popular only with this Japanese economic rise.
Mm.
And I visited farms in Kagoshima, and I was explained that every rice farms around here, who owns maybe 2 acres rice plot,
Right.
we have one cattle, and it was a working cattle. And then in visiting many Wagyu feedlots now, I've realized that many of these Wagyu feedlot now have converted dairy operation to a Wagyu operation. Probably with a decline, with the of the population, or the the young population, the milk consumption is going down.
Yeah.
They
Switching over to beef.
So really, eating Wagyu is really a modern thing.
Yeah, it's a normal thing now.
Yeah. But probably, and there was history of Japanese, like underground society, eating Wagyu or eating wild game, because it's a Buddhist country, and spirit lives in all living things, so sort of prohibited to eat any bird, or I don't know why fish was always okay, but eating bird
Right.
or deer or cattle, but
Yeah.
but there was there's a history that there was a secret society, maybe some with the warrior clan that made them stronger if they ate beef. So
Yeah.
So
I think so.
excellent.
So it started ramping up. 2008 was probably the initial push for that.
Yeah.
And then you started visiting all the different farms and stuff.
So the Japanese government spent money on food shows, but the most effective way, and I still this day I tell the Japanese the livestock promotion, association, is to invite chefs and restaurant owners to Japan.
For sure.
And at that time, my staff Viriko went to the tour, and they had to stay in a capsule hotel, and it was like a really brutal trip for her. But after, I think she did like 2 trips, but after the second trip, I told her, I'm going to do the next one.
Yeah.
And I got to participate maybe 3 or 4, and Justin, who's in charge of Wagyu now, I think he's been to like that tour like 10 times. Bringing
Yeah,
chefs.
he's been going. Hiro, of course, who's our who's your president now.
And then it's really really a good experience and bonding time for us to with the chef and
you get the connection, and I'm gonna get into some of the connections with the farms.
You have to go one time too.
Oh yeah, you guys got to bring me.
Yeah.
Sean went.
Sean went.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay.
Just briefly, it was a quick one.
Oh, yeah.
I'm totally down.
Okay.
Anytime, just call me. I asked some questions of other people, like, oh, what should I ask Mark? Mark's got this long-standing history. Guy, as you know, who's a friend of ours, and he's been on the podcast.
Yes.
Guy Crims at Niku Butcher Shop. Shout out to Guy. Guy had some really good questions for you. These are Wagyu specific, very technical questions. But one of the things he wanted to know, or you could share with everyone, is how does the feed affect flavor from different farms and give it its true characteristics? Very good question from Guy.
So the characteristic of Japanese Wagyu is there are 5. So I explained that you can eat with your senses. So visually, the marbling is beautiful. And when you cook the Wagyu, it has a special sweet aroma. It's a Wagyu-ko or Wagyu aroma. When you taste it, it has a melt in your mouth sensation because the melting temperature is low. And also the firmness, the meat is really, it's not firm meaning hard, but the fiber is more defined, like kimekomakai or nice
texture.
Yeah. So I would say what causes the melting temperature to be low. So people describe it as the higher level of the oleic acid content, which is similar to the quality of the olive oil. And I think it has to do with the Japanese beef cattle are not implanted with growth hormone. If they get sick, they get antibiotic and they're treated, and they go through like rest period. But I think low energy for a longer time, and I was told that animal like fermented food, like there are farms that we deal with, like the Takamori Wagyu from Iwakuni. Their story is that feeding a sake mash from the Dasai brewery, and specifically from Dasai brewery because they are in the same town, and I think Usunaga farm from Kobe that we feature, there are about 100 farms that actually markets Kobe beef, but we try to stick with one farm, and they can quote saying that they feed whiskey mash from the Yamazaki brewery, which is the Suntory. So I mean, it's part story, but it's they're finding a niche. And I've been to a farm in Kagoshima that fed pineapple scrap. So the sugar is high energy, and
maybe a little sweeter.
The animal
takes it on.
So, but the base feed could be the soy meal or rice meal, and then they feed the corn as a grain, just like the American beef, and they import. But another characteristic is that the farm that I have learned is that the early stage of raising the cattle is the important part, and then they want to make the animal have a very strong stomach. So eating a rice straw is important regimen, and
early on,
and they want to make a strong stomach. That's how they describe me. And another characteristic is that here in the States, the animals are naturally bred. meaning there'll be 10 bulls, and American Wagyu farms, they would have like a 10 bulls and maybe 20 heifers, Angus heifers and crossbreed.
Right.
Whereas in Japan, it's programmed, and they want to market like a 10 head a month, so they program by artificial insemination or embryo transfer, and they want to really domesticate the animal, so they would wean the animal maybe after 2 weeks, and they would really give like a formula milk by hand from the handlers, and so they're really not afraid of people, and I asked a couple of people, from this Wagyu tours, and I visited farm and some of my suppliers, and I've always been taught from my American supplier the order of importance in making a high quality beef is genetic, feed, and farm that it's raised. In that order: genetic, feed, and farm it's raised.
So genetics, and they are black Tajima line
or
cattle, right? For the most part.
For the most part, Angus is popular. But some people believe in Hereford. But yeah, genetic, feed, and how it's raised. But I asked my Japanese supplier, and two of the farmers told me how it's raised is number one, and then maybe feed, and then genetic and feed. So
yeah. I mean, I think how it raised is super important. I've talked to some even local American farmers here that have regenerative farms, and the way they take care of them is like always like the key question.
And they said the handlers, look at the animal health, every day,
and low stress, right? Like they try to give the cattle low
I
stress.
have not been to the farm, but my previous Wagyu in charge person went to a farm in Miyazaki, and as soon as the animal poos, they would take it out and replace with a new sawdust. So maybe that's what's for show or something.
Yeah, maybe.
But I've been to a farm where they actually played music, and not,
Okay. Classical?
I don't remember, but I thought it was weird.
Yeah. So there's different ways of trying to keep the cow super relaxed, right? Like somebody asked me like, "Oh, well, how do I know like what's it like to be a Wagyu, to be cattle in Japan?" I'm like, "Well, it's like going to the spa every day, I think."
So
they're treated like royalty, right?
People ask, if they're really beer fed or get massaged, and I say it's a myth.
Yeah.
Beer is probably too expensive to spare.
Right.
But at least they give beer mash in some farms.
Yeah, so it's still there. It's just a different form of what you're thinking.
They do brush the animal, and and one of our supplier in Omi, Okaki Wagyu, sent us an article saying they do okyu. I don't know the English name. Oxyfunction, or they put like a incense, like hot incense on the animal to relieve stress or something.
Like acupuncture kind of?
Acupuncture, but with like a hot, like a burning incense.
Okay.
And then I said, isn't it dangerous? Put the barn on fire or something.
Right. Well, yeah, that's interesting.
Crazy.
That's interesting.
But to Guy's question, I think each farm, wants to have its own character, and so
they try to have something a little different.
Right? Like Shinshu story is that apple fed, or you hear about the olive fed from Shodoshima.
Yeah,
and it's
Oh, I had olive fed pork when I was in Japan.
Oh yeah.
I went to see my aunt and uncle in Shikoku.
Oh yeah.
And they gave us some. We did sukiyaki, and she's like, "Oh, the pork today is olive fed," and it was really good. And I don't know, like you were saying, like sometimes you're like, I don't know if I could tell the difference, but it just tasted. It was really good. Yeah, so the olive fed pork, I'm on board with that. It tasted great. Like it was really good.
That also kurobuta is also famous in Japan.
Right.
Many chef who goes to Japan, and kurobuta is really only like a fraction of the total
Pork production. Yeah.
Production. And but people who had kurobuta, they all said, Mark, can we import that? But there's a restriction here. Or
How much?
yeah, no, there's a ban on from quarantine reason.
Okay. Yeah, he had another question.
Mm.
He's got two very good questions. Good questions, guy. Global farming affect the flavor or tenderness of the beef.
What's
So I
that?
guess maybe saying different areas where it's being grown, that is going to affect it too, right?
Oh, you mean
course.
within Japan?
Within Japan or
Yeah.
global
No,
seems
I
world
I would say in Japan because the three largest state of the Wagyu production in Japan is Kagoshima, Miyazaki, and Hokkaido,
Okay.
and they're big cow calf state too. And then that's where they're raised.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that warm temperate climate is better for the raising or birthing the calves.
Mm-hmm.
Hokkaido is really the cold and harsh climate, so maybe not conducive to calving. But I've had another person who introduced us to the Hokkaido Wagyu, saying, "Mark, the best American beef comes from the cold climate, Iowa and Nebraska," and he says Hokkaido beef I think is better, So maybe there's truth to that. And Hokkaido
It's producing good.
third largest producer. We're importing Hokkaido.
Yeah.
And Okinawa, which being really farther down south and remote areas, also famous for the calving cows.
Okay.
So as far as raising, I think the colder climate, I think has some effect to it.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
But the feed, I don't know. I haven't been to Hokkaido. I've been to Hokkaido Dairy Farm, but not the Hokkaido Wagyu Farm. But
yeah, I mean, there's a ton of farms. Like I was looking at, like how many brands do you carry?
We have a new generation of staff here, and they're carrying on my suggestion to feature farm-specific, program.
Right.
And just like the Kobe would have 100 farm, we're trying to feature one farm.
Mm-hmm.
There are about 100 Omi Wagyu farm, and then we're featuring the Okaki farm.
Mm-hmm.
We want to,
So you're kind of narrowing it down a little more.
but we are
specific,
handling
right?
Miyazaki and Kagoshima and Kumamoto. We're doing Oita, and so we.
Well, it doesn't have to be a specific number, but you've got
but as far as the prefecture, so Takamori is another farm-specific one that we're featuring.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you got a lot. I mean,
also I shouldn't forget Bushu Hasegawa farm, because Mr. Yokoyama introduced us. That's the guy from Stars and Fu. Really hooked us up on the Wagyu business. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'll try to notate all these.
Globally, I can't really speak, because I know there's Australian Wagyu and American Wagyu and even Uruguay Wagyu. But
yeah, that's something I haven't heard. Those are starting to ramp up.
I think it's, you can't really say generalize American Wagyu being one, or Australian Wagyu being.
Yeah.
I think it's different by each farm.
Yeah, you got to narrow it down to specific farms. Yeah.
Okay, Guy.
Good questions. There's just a lot. There's a lot to go over. You mentioned that initially when you started importing the Japanese Wagyu, like the people only wanted like 3 cuts, right? Basically from the loin, which you explained, which are the major cuts, ribeye, which I love. Everyone loves a ribeye if you like eat beef. But now Japan wants to kind of push the rest of the 80% of the animal, which is not as popular, but it's still good.
So
what's going on
in Japan,
there?
like each Wagyu, I would say 35% of the Wagyu is sold on a carcass, auction basis,
Mm-hmm.
and 65% on a negotiated basis where they would buy the whole lot. But imagine one Japanese carcass would cost like 2,500 yen times. Like if U.S. cattle right now costs about 2,000, the Japanese one carcass will cost like anywhere from 12 to $15,000. So it's that much more expensive.
Okay.
And most so these carcass, which is auctioned off head at a time, the buyer or like a restaurant would merchandise the whole animal.
Yeah.
And or like a retail shop would feature the
whole thing.
from chuck to round.
Right.
And whereas the Wagyu export business to the United States, which is not familiar with the thin slice way of eating, the familiar cuts are cuts that are easiest to market, and those are strip loin, ribeye, and tenderloin that can be used as a steak or petite steak or into the more like a tartar,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and it's also a price factor too, because the Japanese Wagyu loin, which is priced anywhere from $60 to $200 a pound,
Mm-hmm.
the American Wagyu loin for the same cut can be had for $15 to $30 a pound.
Right.
So it's maybe twice or three times as higher. Whereas let's take a chuck roll. A Japanese chuck roll will cost like $25 to $35 a pound, whereas American Wagyu is like $5 a pound. So it's like a five, so it's
Big
5
price
to
difference.
7 times, and even the round cuts. And Japanese Wagyu would have more marbling 10 times more marbling than the American commodity choice or prime top round.
Right.
The price would be 5-6 times more. So I think it's hard for the regular restaurant to justify and merchandise. And I've also explained that it's hard to teach. It's easy to teach how to eat, but it's hard to teach how to cook. So I think it really, to merchandise round cuts and chuck meat, you have to merchandise more thin slice product, and unless you have the skill and the machine to thin slice
Yeah.
and even dishes to create
Yeah.
I think it'll be long ways before many people eat hot pot shabu shabu sukiyaki,
Wagyu. Yeah.
or even but it's changing. You see at the Costco or other meat shop,
Yeah.
featuring more
How do you-
thin slice.
Since learning about Wagyu through you and Sean and Hiro, like, how do you feel about like when you see Wagyu at Costco and there's no explanation where it's from? It just says Japanese Wagyu. Maybe it's a A5, which is the highest on the grading scale.
It's really unfortunate.
Yeah, because it's giving like
because the
bad look, right?
Yeah, and the farmers really take good care into raising that
Yeah.
animal, and
Yeah.
and the story should be told.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean, that's part of why I had you on is you're able to explain, because of the experience you've had. You've been to the farms, you've been to Japan, you've seen all the beef coming in, and you're saying that each one, like narrowing down the prefecture, but then narrowing down an actual one single farm.
Yes.
And I think that's more and more people want that now. I think they want more information. Like a lot of people like grass-fed, grass-finished beef now, especially out here, because it's truly organic without the weird corn stuff. But like, I think that's all we ask, right? Is to have that little explanation. It gives it a bad look, right? Like, because it's not telling you everything, and you really don't know where it's from, right?
So I don't know if you've been to Japan, right?
Yeah.
And then you go to
Right.
supermarket,
Right.
and you see the poster saying, "Mr. Tanaka made this tomato." Maybe Mr. Suzuki's farm made it too, but
Yeah.
at least you sort of feel closer to what you're eating,
Right.
and
Yeah. We're getting it.
we
It's a
don't
lot
want.
better here like that too.
Yeah. I think telling a story is, you want to tell the story.
Yeah, and you're more invested in it.
Uh,
Yeah, for sure. And what do you think is the secret to your success with this business? I mean, you've been in it a long time.
I think being bilingual and bicultural, and I guess going back to the earlier statement, like being adapting when I'm around Japanese, I could be Japanese. When I'm around the Midwest,
Yeah,
producer, I could be.
yeah, a chameleon.
I could never be Nebraskan or Iowan, but at least I can understand where they're
Yeah,
coming
yeah,
from.
yeah, yeah. That's Sean's question. Sean, Sean, when?
So, and also I think, I mean, you have to like what you do. I mean,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah,
I had to travel a lot, and I didn't mind that,
Yeah.
And I like to meet people and learn about them, and
Well, I can feel like the passion that you have for the business, because even when I first met you and Omi was here, and I got to meet the farmer from Omi, I could see it, and I was like, "Hey, can you help me?" Because I still feel disgraced that I can't speak fluent Japanese. Skoshi Nihongo, right? And so I had you with me, and we got to talk to one of the farmers from Omi, and it was great. And I could see you transfer my questions to him with that passion,
that's a really.
passing on the knowledge, like, because I was really interested. I had never talked to a Wagyu farmer in person,
So talking about Mr. Okayama, that's really a unique arrangement because we're buying directly from the farm,
Yeah.
and usually the Japanese people are afraid to be engaged in an overseas commerce without really knowing. But a friend introduced me to the farm, and I think that having that people connection is important. Like just like the finding Rancho 17 was introduced by a freight forwarder that handled truck transport,
Yeah.
and I think luck has something to do with it too.
More like right place, right time.
True.
Luck is there, but I think it's all usually like right place, right time. Like I'm sitting here with you today because
And-
of the people I've met, right? Like, which is cool.
And
Yeah.
I, running a business, I am blessed with good people that
Yeah.
supported me. Accounting and people that I'm really bad with numbers, so I had a really good accountant that
Yeah. So hiring good
people
good
and
people.
and people who, because as an exporter and importer, most of our business appears on paper, so we have to do a lot of documentation and transportation coordination, and Zoe has been with me for more than 10 years, and she's been a really strong support, and
That's awesome. What is the future of the industry, you think?
business is always evolving and always changing, and it's going to change more, and some people say, Mark, you got out at a good time. But it's Hero, who succeeded me, is really adept in digitalizing and incorporating the new technology, and being an older mind, I don't think I can keep up with that technology.
Sure.
So I think
Just adapting the business. Yeah.
I think Hero's doing a good job.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's Hiro
And,
Sugano.
yes, and and he's young. I started Trex when I was 40, and I transferred my responsibility when he was 40. So
Mm.
his next 20, 25 years is his challenge to carry on. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's awesome.
Mm.
Any before we get to some fun stuff, we'll close it out shortly here. Any advice or business practice you would give someone?
Huh.
Since you've been through so much, you've seen so much, you've seen a lot of struggle, ups and downs.
I say some of the comment I give, advice I give is that give the bad news first and keep the save the good news till later. And then being in a middle position where we're buying and selling. I hate the word being called a broker, but we are really a marketer. We provide service, and claim is always part of our business, and taking care of the claim and and reporting, you know, being responsible to the customer. Just like I mentioned, the Japanese supplier don't want to buy direct or sell directly or buy directly from us.
Mm.
They want to have a trading company who would mitigate the risk in
Okay.
between.
Yeah.
So we want any customer or any supplier to feel close to us, that that we narrow the gap in between. So
Nice.
that's the important part. And,
Okay. Good advice. Anything you do different?
Different. I mean, office has changed a lot since I was managing. I mean, when I first started Trex, we wore suit and tie, even though we only have four people in the office.
Yeah.
I told people to dress up a little bit more to sort of, have a sharper mindset, and but another thing is, so right before COVID, we were going to, some of the office staff was asking, can we, incorporate remote work? And that was really before COVID. We were talking, and we were allocating, maybe one day a week to certain people, and remote work works for some company and not for others. And
Yeah.
and I am of my advice to Hero, or at least I feel comfortable if I can watch my staff,
Yeah.
keep a closer eye on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, technology is helping.
If you're responsible, I think, and Hero has given that remote to work allocation to responsible people.
Yeah, I think like you said, it works for certain companies. And also, if it's remote, where you have people like maybe on the East Coast, and you can still in touch with them, But
actually,
you still
Trex,
want eyes.
actually, Trex has a full-time. Actually, Trex has a remote salesman in Chicago.
Oh, there you go.
And we now have an office in Korea too.
Okay.
Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah.
All right.
We have 2 people there.
Okay.
I guess that's like a remote office.
Before I close it out, I always have like some fun questions. This is an easy one, but what is your favorite way to have Wagyu? Or the favorite way it's prepared?
I think somebody was asking me on a golf tournament the other day, and I said yakiniku. Yakiniku, you grill over open flame,
fire,
and then the heavy oil, is burnt, and you get the crispy outside and rare, tender middle, and
so good.
the guy might laugh at me, but I like to eat rice with my beef.
Yeah.
Yakiniku.
I'm with you.
Goes really well with rice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
Huh.
I was at the Tsukiji market, and there's a guy there, and he's wine and Wagyu, and he's down one of the little alleys, and I saw him on Instagram, before I was going there, And I was like, how am I going to find this guy? And even we walked around, I was with my brother and we were walking around. I was like, I can't leave till I find this guy. I finally found him. And that's basically what he does. He does the Wagyu nigiri. So he'll put 3 slices down, and then blast it, he'll torch it and get it nice and crispy. And then there's your, and then he has a little bit of wasabi or of just a little glaze of sauce, maybe some, I don't know if he puts ponzu or what on there, but he had a little thing, and then so good. Yeah, I mean it tastes great either way, but I agree with you. I'll have some rice. I want some rice.
Yeah.
Perfect. Something that makes so a lot of people that I've talked to, a lot of them are chefs. Like if I talk to Chef Ryan at Trifecta, right? I'll ask him like, what's a tool or some piece of gear that you like that helps your life every day?
Gear.
Yeah. It's kind of an odd question, but people want to hear what things are. And it could be anything for you. It's you.
Well, I have a friend, Jun, who really is a good. He doesn't like to be called a chef, but he cooks.
He's a chef.
He comes to our house, and he complained to me that my knives are really dull. So
Okay.
Ever since that, I tried to keep my knife at home sharpened, and even Ryan and I took a class sharpening how to sharpen knives.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. But knife. Besides knife at work, I mean, our cell phone is like a computer.
Yeah.
And,
right. Yeah. Sharp knife is good advice for sure. It's always been a top thing. You don't want to get cut with a dull one. That's all bad. Anything you want to promote for Trex at all? I know you're kind of the advisor now, kind of the.
So we, Trex is 7-year-old company, and I hope contact Justin and Andy for your Wagyu needs. And we are also, our foundational company is Export, and so we want to service our suppliers continuously for the next 27 years.
Yep. And your website is?
www.teamtrex.com.
There we go. Mark, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, dude. Pleasure. Arigato.
Yeah, arigatou gozaimasu.
Take care, everybody.
Okay, bye.
And as a quick reminder, the restaurants and gear talked about on each episode can be found on my website, foodoriginspodcast.com. I appreciate your support, and thanks for listening.